All right, we're at 7 o'clock. We got a couple of people starting to come on in. We'll give it another minute or two until about 7:02 or 3, and then we'll get rolling. I'm going to make sure I drop the link into the chat if anybody wants to kind of follow along on the document tonight for the fact sheet. Where are we at here? We are 7:02 and a half according to the world clock. My mic's on, my camera's on. Okay, I think we're good to go. This is the every Wednesday night South Carolina Normal Cannabis Conversation. My name is Scott Weldon. I am the Executive Director of the South Carolina Chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. All of our meetings are an environment of education and awareness and are not an open market for the sale, purchase, or distribution of cannabis. We do not encourage or condone illegal behavior of any kind. Welcome everybody who's joining me here on the Zoom call tonight. I'm using a mic built into the camera instead of this headset one, so you guys know this one goes out on me every now and again. So if you have any issues with sound or whatever tonight, let me know. Turn on your mic, text me, whatever you need, or chat, whatever. But welcome everybody who's here on the call. Welcome to anybody who may be viewing over on our YouTube channel live. And also welcome to anybody who's watching it as a recording on YouTube later on. Mentioning YouTube, I always like to point out that we are not monitoring the comment section on YouTube during our Zoom meeting here. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them down below in the comment section. We'll revisit the comment section of this video in a couple of days once the YouTube's done rendering it. And hopefully at that time, we can address your questions, comments, and or concerns. Again, my name's Scott Weldon, the Executive Director of the South Carolina Normal, and we are here for the South Carolina Cannabis Conversation. What we've been doing off and on over the past couple of weeks, because I've kind of been, you all know me, a little bit lazy on scheduling content, on getting a couple of guests on board. And as you know, we did have a political candidate on a few months back. And we've got the option to eventually bring in, I think, a few others, but we're really, really early in the cycle. I mentioned to one of the other candidates that it's interesting in coming on that I think it's going to be best if we start having some of them on as guests after the turn of the year, after the legislative session kicks up for 2022, which is January 11th is their kickoff date. And moving even more toward like April, because we figure a primary date hasn't been scheduled yet, hasn't been chosen, but it's generally early June so that they can have the runoff date by the end of June. We're anticipating that same type of selection next year. So we're thinking really the primary season's not going to be heating up until March, April. April's going to be our month where we're going to have all the candidates want to come on during April to talk about their position on marijuana. And of course, May leading right up to the primaries. I could see it again then with the generals getting a little bit closer to October next year, maybe August, September, we get some of the candidates on. But I've been kind of watching a little bit through Ballotopia. There's another one I have to get from Carly Wolf, our political director at National State Political. She watches a particular one, and it helps keep her update on all this different legislation on all the different 50 states. This year, I believe it is House of Representatives only. It'll be next cycle that senators in South Carolina will be able to run, have candidates on ballot, whatever. So I'm trying to keep an eye out on what's going on with different representatives throughout the state. If y'all happen to hear about a candidate in your area and running against the, for a legislative seat, let me know, kind of give me a heads up. Because like I said, I'm trying to keep an eye on it so that as we get these candidates announcing, we can invite them on, or maybe schedule a roundtable or something like that to try and help keep everybody here in the state up to date on what the candidates are planning for next election cycle, and where their position is on marijuana. Of course, don't forget to visit vote.normal.org for the Smoke the Vote voter guide. We will be starting again working on that probably in a month or 3 to get that active, start updating that, trying to get any new information, sending out our candidate questionnaire. Again, the candidate questionnaire, I'm guessing will probably go out January, February. I don't know. We'll see when we start getting candidates announcing. I may send it out piecemeal as I see announcements. See if we can get them to answer about their marijuana position. But that's not what we're going to be talking about tonight. Tonight, I decided we'll talk about one of the fact sheets out on normal.org. Excuse me. On how to end marijuana prohibition with regard to the Controlled Substances Act. Let me drop this link down here one more time in the chat, just in case somebody joined after I dropped it in last time. I see in the chat, Shane is driving, so he will be just listening in for the most part. And there's that link for the document I'm going to share with you a little bit tonight. It's not a real long one, relatively short. I think it's a 2-side printout for my printout, but relatively short. Let me share this. I get a little bit of mixed comments many times on our social media talking about legalization versus decriminalization. And unfortunately, it's not always real easy to explain in just a couple of words. Decriminalization really does not necessarily mean what a lot of people think it means. It still doesn't make it legal. It's still illegal to have marijuana, but the decriminalization is in general up to about an ounce, and it is usually then confiscated from you, and you get a ticket with a fine type concept. The petitions that we try and push and the decriminalization we would be in favor of and advocating for in South Carolina towns and municipalities would really be a no fine, no time, no court cost type decriminalization. We want to take the money out of it. We feel and we found that's a lot of what they're doing in Ohio. And the result tends to be that if somebody's caught with a small amount of marijuana, it's confiscated and they're shooed away and told to go down the street, because if there's no money in it for the justice system, there's nobody going to really want to be bothered with doing the paperwork and writing the ticket and going through all that, because there's no money in it for them. And as many of you may or may not know, a lot of my position is the way the justice system is structured. Now, a lot of it is basically fleecing citizens for money, extortion, that kind of thing. But that's, again, a little bit more of a personal opinion, but so be it. Anyway, that's kind of a little bit where legalization allows for actually somebody to have some in their pocket and the police can't bother them at all. And when we talk legalization, we're talking at the federal level, we're talking about removing from the Controlled Substances Act, descheduling from the drug schedule by the Controlled Substances Act, which went into effect in 1970 under, still, I think, my favorite, not president, Richard M. Nixon. You know, I mean, there's been a lot to dislike about a lot of different presidents since him and probably even before. But those were some of my very formative years in the late 60s, early 70s. And, you know, geez, it wasn't until the early 60s where people started getting color TVs in their homes. You know, my father was a doctor. We were probably the first ones in the neighborhood to have a color TV. And we got to watch the Vietnam War on a freaking color TV, which was like the first war that was really media publicized. And of course, with that, you got to see the protests and you got to see the response and you got to see anyway, apparently, I must have watched more of it or so than I thought I was, whether it's, you know, out of the back of my, you know, not paying attention and just, but I think a lot of that sort of formed a lot of my opinions today. So, damn old throwback hippie liberals, damn, you know, well, and it was all anti-war. It was all, you know, well, a lot of it was, you know, teach peace. It was all about, it was Act 64. You had the Equal Rights Amendment. You know, so a lot of it was still about equal rights and implementing that. And then, of course, after the equal rights was the pushback against that. And to be quite honest with you, the Controlled Substances Act is just a big part of the new Jim Crow. So anyway, I'm sharing this little document here, How to End Marijuana Prohibition with regard to the Controlled Substances Act. It's a normal memorandum. Federal marijuana prohibition can only be repealed by descheduling, not rescheduling cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. Unfortunately, our current president has, like, I think, mentioned he'd be in favor of rescheduling. I blink my eyes a little bit if any of you are seeing me instead of the shared screen. I think he wanted to, may have alluded to like Schedule 3 or something like that. And that's actually, in Normal's position, completely unacceptable. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. The mechanics of the Controlled Substances Act, which was enacted in 1970, established 5 distinct classifications or schedules for various controlled substances. Substance classified as Schedule 1, the most prohibitive classification, must meet 3 criteria. A, the drug and or substance has a high potential for abuse. B, the drug or other substance has no currently acceptable medicinal use in treatment in the United States. And C, there is a lack of accepted safety for the use of the drug or other substance under medical supervision. All right. Substances classified in categories other than Schedule 1 have been deemed by the Food and Drug Administration to possess some currently accepted medical uses. These substances also possess varying degrees of abuse potential, from high potential of abuse, which is Schedule 2, to low potential abuse, Schedule 5, as well as varying degrees of potential psychological or physical dependence, from severe, again, Schedule 2 to limited, Schedule 5. And these substances are only available legally under a doctor's prescription and obtained at licensed pharmacies. These last line, very important, these substances are not allowed to be either marketed or used for non-medicinal purposes. So keep that in mind as we move forward a little bit. These substances, all the other, all these ones on schedule are not to be either marketed or used for non-medicinal purposes. All right, cannabis is more analogous with substances not associated with the CEA, like dietary supplements and vitamins. I always think it should be classified with herbal remedies. But these supplements, vitamins, are marketed as general wellness products. They lack FDA approval, and thus they're not classified in any schedule. These products are regulated by separate specific federal regulations. An example of that is the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994. And similarly, alcohol and tobacco are not scheduled under the CSA. These two substances are descheduled. Therefore, state governments and federal government both possess the authority to regulate these substances. Now, these next couple of paragraphs, they go into a little bit more depth or detail on this control of alcohol and tobacco by both the state and federal. I am going to go into this deep dive a little bit. So concerning alcohol, the federal government establishes various rules and regulations, such as imposition of a standard warning label on the product with Alcohol Beverage Labeling Act, and limitations on how the product may be marketed and advertised. Now, again, I go back to when I was a youngster, and there was pretty much no, you'd see a lot of cigarette advertisement. You see none of that anymore on TV. Alcohol advertisement was pretty common. You still do see it, but I guess there's limits on how they can do that in certain media. The government can also enforce prohibitions on the production and sale of certain types of alcohol, such as caffeine-infused alcohol products. And federal laws also provide regulations governing home distilling. Excuse me. Home distilling is prohibited without a federal permit. You can actually distill at home, but you need a federal permit. That's something I didn't know. I thought home distilling was illegal, because I watch a lot of these picker shows and things like that, and they find old stills and things, and they play up how illegal it's supposed to be to have stills. Not really illegal to have the parts, you're just not allowed to have them all together and operational. That's the big thing. Also, federal laws provide governing home brewing. There's a maximum of 200 gallons per household per year. Now, the home brewing, you're talking beer, ale, hard cider, wine, that type of stuff. So you're lower alcohol, but 200 gallons of wine or beer or something. If you've got the knack for that, more power to you. I think that's a great way to do it. Brew your own home brew. But again, there is controls over that, and not only at the federal level. States also possess a wide latitude when establishing their own localized regulations governing alcohol production and sales. For example, states can set their own regulations regarding where alcoholic goods may or may not be sold. Pennsylvania, we had liquor stores, which were a state-run store. One of my first trips as a youngster, I'll say, below the Mason-Dixon line, and I saw, beer and wine in some of the mini mart type places. I was like, wow, check that out. I was completely blown away because you had beer distributors for beer and wine, pretty much, or beer distributors more for beer, your hard cider, ale, that kind of stuff. And the distributors would sell sodas and things like that. And then your state stores, so that would be your wine and liquor. And then where I lived, we would, before I was old enough, 21 in Pennsylvania, at 18, we could go to Jersey and buy, I know they had beer there. I don't think, I mean, they must have had a liquor store system there as well, but I don't know if it was state run. I think Jersey were privately owned beer store type thing, or liquor stores. Down here in South Carolina, they have, the red dot. I believe they're red dot everywhere, but it's just like an indicator. But also then beer and wine in supermarkets and that type of stuff. So the localities can decide that. I mean, and a good example of that too is they could indicate what hours. I haven't taken note of that here, but I know when Pennsylvania first implemented in supermarkets, which was not that long ago, after a certain time, these shades or shutters or whatever were pulled down over the wine and beer, and you couldn't purchase any from this market at that hour, from certain hours. And also, local jurisdictions, if they wish, they can impose prohibition altogether on alcohol sales. So you could be in a dry county. I don't believe there are any more in South Carolina. Somebody may be able to correct me in chat, but I am not aware of any. I know there used to be. So anyway, as we move through the document here a little bit, why marijuana must be removed from the Controlled Substances Act. First off, Normal believes that a similar descheduling option where the federal government and the state governments both possess varying degrees of regulatory authority over the production, marketing, and taxation of the product is appropriate for cannabis, as appropriate as it is for alcohol, for tobacco. And we take this position for various reasons. One of the reasons is many states have already established specific statewide rules and regulations, laws and regulations regulating cannabis production, taxation, and sales. Descheduling provides these states and others with the authority to continue to move forward with these regulations, while also authorizing those states who wish to continue to prohibit cannabis production and sale the flexibility to do so. I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit more before I go on. I have had discussions a couple of times. I hear people will post or comment every now and again that if they deschedule, it automatically, magically makes it legal everywhere. And that is not true, because states have also in their own state constitution made it illegal. So now, mind you, I think if they reschedule, there's certain language where the state has to, be in compliance of the Controlled Substances Act. But rescheduling again is not the answer. That does not make it. It doesn't. And we'll go in a little bit more of that as we go by before I go too far. But anyway. It doesn't make it legal in the state. The state still has their laws. So we still have to keep fighting as we are now. Secondly, on that, rescheduling is intellectually dishonest. Just as cannabis does not meet the strict criteria, oh, there goes my mouth, of a Schedule 1 controlled substance, and we all know it doesn't. It also does not meet the specific criteria to define Schedules 2 through 5. First off, as a botanical plant, it currently lacks FDA approval, which all the Schedule 2 through 5 have, and is likely to continue to lack such approval moving forward. It also lacks the abuse potential typically associated with substances categorized in Schedules 2 and 3. And further, substances in these scheduling categories are only available to patients under a prescription of a physician, therefore making such a classification inapplicable to cannabis in those states that regulate its adult use. So we've already got, well, I believe 11 states that are regulating adult use. And so again, it would be counter to and inapplicable in those cases. Also, rescheduling cannabis will not necessarily facilitate clinical research. Under the Controlled Substances Act, federal policy is that all clinical research is done with cannabis that is purchased through the National Institute for Drug Abuse's University of Mississippi. If any of you have ever heard me go off on this, my understanding is the cannabis that's produced in at the University of Mississippi is pretty much equivalent to what we used to call ditchweed back in the day. It's a Mexican strain. They have it labeled actually Mexican. I think they freeze it. It's in big barrels, and it's ditchweed. It doesn't say anywhere in this document. I believe the DEA has been asked to or indicated they're going to be approving some new cultivators for their program, for the research program, but that has not to date, been come to fruition. And again, the cannabis that's produced at the University of Mississippi is not comparable to what consumers are being able to purchase at the dispensaries in legal states. Also, Congress has recently descheduled low THC cannabis. Back in the December 2018, with the Farm Bill, basically, they enacted legislation removing low THC at below 0.3% cannabis crops from the jurisdiction of the Controlled Substances Act. This change in policy established a dual regulatory authority over the regulation of hemp to both the federal government, example, the state's Department of Agriculture, and the individual states. Descheduling cannabis altogether would be consistent with this existing policy. And many of the state federal regulations already established this by this policy. So again, descheduling is really the only, what's the word they used here? It's intellectually dishonest, would be the only intellectually honest way to move forward at the federal level, is removing from the Controlled Substances Act completely the cannabis plant. So the conclusion from NORML: further analysis, market research, and discussions must address regulatory practices for the eventual interstate commerce of cannabis, and NORML looks forward to constructively engaging in this dialogue. In the meantime, in order to rectify the state and federal conflict that currently exists over marijuana policy, and in order to best maintain the market controls that a vast majority of states have enacted to promote public health, prevent the distribution of marijuana to minors, and to ensure safe business practices and improve public safety, cannabis must be descheduled, not rescheduled, from the Controlled Substances Act. So that's marijuana, that's NORML's national position, that's our position. I'm going to go ahead and turn off share here. And that's my little diatribe on that. That's why, again, a lot of what we push for, when I moved to South Carolina, when I moved to Charleston, and looked for a NORML chapter and didn't find one, and then found a meeting talking about starting one. That's why I went to the meeting, is because although I support legalization of medical marijuana, NORML was founded more as a civil rights, civil liberties organization. People being locked up for this plant for any reason is just unforgivable. And so that's kind of why I went forward, and am still moving forward with South Carolina NORML. We need to address more than just medical marijuana here in the state. We need to address decriminalization. We need to, at least as a stepping stone starting point. And we know that law enforcement's going to go, see, we knew it. They just want to move forward to full adult use, full recreational. Quite honest with you, yeah, we do. And I'm not afraid to admit, yes, I believe medical is a step. Decriminalization is going to probably have to end up being part of the step. decriminalization is all about harm reduction. How can you not be for harm reduction? Again, I'm going to ask you all to take a minute one time and go through some of these fact sheets. Let me go ahead and share just the general fact sheet link to you for you here. There we go. There's a number of them. They kind of talk about a lot of different positions. But sorry about that. A little sidetrack brain fart. But that's why, again, I push so hard for more than just medical. You may have even seen me lately posting a little bit about overturned Terry, the Terry versus Ohio. If any of you ever happen to watch some of the First Amendment auditors online, on YouTube, I tend to be a little addicted to watching these things. Terry versus Ohio, in essence, puts officer safety over your rights, over your civil rights and civil liberties. And so under Terry versus Ohio, if an officer stops you and has reasonable suspicion, and if you look kind of deep into it, it's not reasonable suspicion of a crime, just reasonable suspicion. You have to kind of go to YouTube, listen to the Terry versus Ohio arguments. It gets pretty in detail. And for the most part, it's just, I didn't like the way they looked, you know, whether it was the color of their skin or the color of their shirt or the way they leaned against something. In essence, that's kind of what it is. And so they made up this thing called detainment, investigatory detainment, and as an add-on to you're not under arrest, you're detained. It's supposed to be different, and yet when you're detained, they arrest your movement. They can, you know, make you sit on the curb. They can put a knee in your neck. They can put handcuffs on you. It's wordplay by the Supreme Court. It's wordplay, and Terry should be overturned. And mind you, I don't want to get too much into that because that could be just a whole rabbit hole to kind of dwell, deep dive into. If you want to know a little bit more of that, do a little snooping on YouTube on overturned Terry. You'll find it. You'll find some info. Anyway, same thing with marijuana law in the Supreme Court. Ooh, where did I share this recently? I actually got some of this from the same information. There was a court case in 2005, and basically, if our Supreme Court would have found the way they should have found, marijuana would be legal today. Heck, where do I have that hidden? I forgot where I put that one. I'll have to share that with you again another time. But believe it or not, you know, the Supreme Court, they're supposed to be out there protecting people's rights. And if you kind of look at the rulings, it's not quite what they allude to. Anyway, well, I don't know if Josh was in earlier, but yeah, I think he was. But anyway, I'm going to do stop going down, sidetracking too much on that. Any questions about tonight's conversation on the difference between descheduling and rescheduling, or any other questions you might have on, let's say, decriminalization versus legalization, or any of that kind of stuff? I see a comment, Joey just popped in. Let me take a second to read it. Joey's comment, if nobody has access to chat, and I know a couple folks don't, is the fact that it's mostly people of color being arrested slows this process. Decrim and adult use are a ways off, I think, but changing government would be a big step in the right direction. It's going to be a challenge changing. Well, again, if we can change at federal level, That's a big first step. Write your state representatives. It's the MORE Act in the Senate. I'm sorry, it's the MORE Act in the House, U.S. House. It's COA, Cannabis Opportunity and Administration Act. Administration and Opportunity Act. Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. Okay, got it. COA. Joey's mentioning our governor, who's one gubernatorial candidate, Joe Cunningham, who's come out very pro full legalization. I know there's another Democratic registered candidate, Gary Vitor. We're hoping again to get him on the show sometime in spring. He's pro cannabis, and Mia McLeod is the co-sponsor on the excuse me, is a co-sponsor on Tom Davis's bill. She has also sponsored decriminalization for simple possession. Yep, I mean, Shane's right. It's not just people of color. It's low income. It's to me, a lot of it is a moral war of the haves and the have-nots. But still, enforcement is throughout our state is on average with the rest of the nation. As far and then if you go to our counties, even some of our worst counties like Pickens, I think is 8.5 or 8.4 times more likely to be arrested if you're a person of color than not. Is not as high as some of the counties in Louisiana that are more like 11 times more likely and such like that. It varies throughout the nation. It varies county to county throughout the states. It doesn't change the fact that it's still a smaller portion of our population taking a brunt of the burden in the arrests. And so again, that's one of the reasons why I picked NORML more so than to join in one of the medical marijuana groups that had already existed here in the state. I could have done that, but they don't care about the criminalization for you and me and the poor, or full legalization for you and me and the poor, or that kind of thing. Then it's only if you're sick enough and rich enough to afford to go through the medical system is really why I went more in this direction. Anyway, and it's targeted enforcement, and I'm one of those that many people might not like. I don't like the phrase defund the police, but to be able to say reallocate funds from this type of enforcement more into other social services, it's really hard to put on a sign and hold up and I love the new stuff that tells you potential spam on your phone calls. So, and that's really what a lot more of it needs to be. First off, again, if you watch some of these audits that I watch, a lot of our law enforcement officers aren't really educated on what your rights are, or they don't necessarily care, or they know that they're claimed for being afraid and wanting safety, allow them to do anything they want and stomp all over your rights. And that's why you'll see a lot of times, okay, oh, you get back, go back, officer safety, and it has nothing to do with officer safety. Often it has to do with transparency. I know here in Charleston, and I don't know about any other cities in South Carolina at this point, but here in Charleston, the Charleston Police Department took $1 million of taxpayer funds to encrypt their radio system. Their paranoid delusion, in my mind, in my description, is they claim that, oh, the bad guys were using it to circumvent their enforcement, and I really believe it's because they don't want to be they don't want transparency. It makes it a lot tougher on the news stations, the radio stations, whoever your reporters, to be able to hear a radio call and go, oh, hey, I'm going to go and run out there with my camera and I'm going to get this call. So yeah, it makes it a lot harder. Now they have to jump through hoops, go through the Freedom of Information Act process, which isn't something that happens instantly. So transparency. I believe in governmental transparency. All right. That was my rant and rave on that stuff. Deschedule, don't reschedule. Educate, change our government. I actually did hear something from somebody, one of our participants that is going to be at our event in January is Americans for Prosperity. I had another someone contact me and say, oh, they're funded by the Koch brothers, so we won't be participating with them. They're also doing a cannabis advocate training up in Colombia. It's posted on our Facebook page somewhere, not too far down. And mind you, Americans for Prosperity and normal in general, and my political beliefs are not all in a line. There's a lot of things that I may or may not disagree with their policies. But we are in a Republican-controlled Senate and House at the state level, with currently a Republican governor. And if there is a organization that is willing to reach across the aisle in full legalization efforts, I'm more than willing to work with them. I don't necessarily like the two-party system and or the two parties we get to choose from. Yeah, there's third parties out there, but unfortunately, it's not usually very easy to get a third party candidate onto into the winning lane, in the winner's circle, unless maybe they run unopposed or that kind of stuff. Matter of fact, there's another group I've started sort of following a little bit. I think it's called bettervotesouthcarolina.org, and they're talking about advocating for what they call a ranked voting system. It's kind of interesting. I had never really heard about it before. It could actually do away with primaries and let a whole bunch of candidates at one election kind of thing, ranked voting. And what was it again? Bettervote.org or something like that. Anyway, sounds like an interesting concept. Not something I have a lot of time to really concentrate on, but I believe we may actually even be doing a collaboration with them at some point as far as a voter registration event or something like that. We'll see as we move down the road. All right, that's about it as far as decrim or deschedule versus reschedule at federal level. Again, it doesn't change a whole lot for us at the state if they do deschedule. We have 8, if I remember correctly, 8 House representatives in our state, right to yours. I don't have any more postcards around. Send our postcards to them if you have them. Order some off our website if you don't, or contact me and I'll send you some. But anyway, contact your representatives at the in federal level in the House. Clyburn and Clyburn's our last Democratic member of the House. Mace, I believe there's some support. Tom Rice, I believe there's some support. Some of them you'll never get any support of those 8, and I don't know them all off the top of my head, but I know somebody, if they're not on here now, somebody will say, Joe Wilson, you'll never turn Joe Wilson. Then vote him out, please. Anyway, 8 House representatives, contact them. Of course, our 2 Senate representatives, you got Lindsey Graham, Tim Scott. So if you want to contact them about the COA, try it. You know, Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. Those 8 House members, contact them about co-sponsoring the MORE Act. All 10 of them, contact them and request that they become a member of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus. That's all we can do at this point, federal level, is keep writing them, keep contacting them. I will remind you all real quick as I kind of scroll back to it, there is the Take Action page on Normal National. I'm going to drop that here in the chat again, that link real quick. Go to normal.org/ACT. You'll have a few links in there where you can contact different legislators. I do see they need to update. They do have the one about Schumer, Wyden, Booker, and Lowe, what you think about their proposal. That is closed as of September 1st. So skip that one. And then you can click on our state, look at what's going on here in the state. Can't really do much about it because nobody's in session at the moment, but that's what I have for you tonight. Peek at the time. Oh, we're about 7:47. Time, I think, to wrap it up. Reach out to me, anybody, if you have any other topics you'd like to hear us talk about. We will be moving forward again with some more of the fact sheets again. I've got a couple of feelers out for a couple of other folks. So keep an eye out on our social media, usually on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I like to get it Monday or Tuesday, but I'm sorry, like today, it wasn't until after lunch. But again, thank you for joining me here at the South Carolina Normal Cannabis Conversation. Don't forget to find us on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and go to our website, normalsc.org. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and sign up for our newsletter. That's all I got for you tonight. Thank you again. See you again next Wednesday.